The town of Mavuno Ridge was glowing with excitement that night. The Nkosi family mansion looked like something from a dream. Bright golden lights were hanging from the tall trees, soft music played in the background, and tables were filled with delicious food and sparkling drinks. Everyone important in town had come to celebrate Naledi Nkosi's engagement. People were laughing, taking pictures, and congratulating her. Naledi stood proudly in the center of the garden wearing a beautiful dress, smiling as guests praised her and her successful fiancé, Kabelo Dlamini. Everything looked perfect. Then something unexpected happened. From the edge of the crowd, a quiet young woman slowly stepped forward. It was Amara Nkosi, Naledi's younger sister. She held a small gift box carefully in both hands. Unlike the glamorous guests around her, Amara looked simple and calm. Some people whispered when they saw her, surprised that she had even come to the party. Amara walked closer to Naledi and softly said, "I brought something important for you." But the moment Naledi saw her, her smile disappeared. Her face suddenly filled with anger and embarrassment, as if Amara had ruined the night just by appearing. Before anyone could understand what was happening, Naledi raised her hand. Slap! The sound echoed through the entire garden. Amara's face turned to the side as Naledi's hand struck her hard. The music stopped immediately. Conversations died. Glasses froze in people's hands as every guest stared in shock. Naledi pointed angrily at her sister and shouted, "Are you blind? How dare you show your face here tonight?" A heavy silence fell over the party. Amara stood there quietly, one hand touching her burning cheek, still holding the small gift box in the other. No one understood what she had done wrong. Guests exchanged confused looks, whispering to each other. But Naledi looked furious, as if Amara had committed the worst crime imaginable. What none of the guests realized in that moment was that this single slap would soon destroy the perfect image of the party and reveal a truth that would shake the entire town of Mavuno Ridge. Amara stood frozen for a moment after the slap. Her cheek burned, but she didn't cry. She simply held the small gift box tightly in her hands while the entire garden stared at her. Guests began whispering to each other, trying to understand what had just happened. Some people looked at Amara with sympathy, while others watched with curiosity, waiting to see what she would do next. Naledi, however, looked furious and embarrassed. She crossed her arms and glared at her sister as if Amara had ruined the most important night of her life. "So this is your plan?" Naledi said loudly so everyone could hear. "You come to my engagement party with some cheap joke to get attention?" A few guests chuckled awkwardly, trying to support Naledi. The atmosphere had turned uncomfortable, but Naledi didn't care. Her pride had already taken over. Amara slowly lifted her head. Her voice was calm, almost too calm for someone who had just been slapped in front of hundreds of people. "It's not a joke," she said quietly. "This box is important. It's for Kabelo." The moment she said Kabelo's name, more whispers spread through the crowd. Naledi's fiancé, Kabelo Dlamini, was standing a few steps away holding a drink. He raised his eyebrow with a confused smile, clearly amused by the scene. Naledi let out a sharp laugh. "You," she said, looking Amara up and down with clear mockery. "Giving something important to my fiancé? Please, don't embarrass yourself even more." Some relatives standing nearby laughed with her. One aunt shook her head and whispered loudly, "Amara has always been strange." Another cousin smirked and said, "Maybe she's jealous the engagement isn't hers." The laughter made the moment even more painful. Amara could feel everyone's eyes on her, waiting for her to react. But instead of arguing, she remained quiet. For a few seconds she looked at her sister, really looked at her, as if she was hoping Naledi would somehow understand something without words. But Naledi only stared back with cold irritation. Amara slowly nodded to herself, as if she had just made a decision. Without saying another word, she walked to the long table where the engagement gifts were placed. The table was covered with expensive boxes wrapped in gold paper and shiny ribbons. Compared to those luxurious presents, Amara's small plain box looked almost invisible. She gently placed it on the table between the other gifts. "I didn't come here to cause problems," Amara said softly. "I just came to give this." Naledi rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. "Then leave. The party doesn't need your drama." More whispers filled the garden as Amara turned around and began walking away. Some guests watched her with pity. Others were still smiling, thinking the moment was just awkward family drama. Cabello took a sip from his glass and laughed quietly with a few friends, clearly entertained by the situation. But none of them knew the truth. Inside that small box were documents, bank records, and contracts that Amara had spent weeks collecting. Papers that revealed a secret so dangerous, it could destroy Cabello's perfect image in a single moment. A secret that, once revealed, would turn the entire engagement celebration into something no one in Mavuno Ridge would ever forget. Amara had known that kind of humiliation for most of her life. The slap at the party was painful, but sadly, it wasn't something completely new for her. Growing up in the small and beautiful area of Kasanga Valley, life in the Nkosi household had always revolved around one person, Naledi. Naledi was the pride of the family. From the time she was young, everyone admired her. She was beautiful, confident, and always the center of attention. When relatives visited, they praised Naledi's looks and her charming personality. Teachers talked about how popular she was at school. Even neighbors often said, "Naledi will grow up to marry someone very rich." Meanwhile, Amara stood quietly in the background. She was not loud like her sister. She didn't like showing off. Amara spent most of her time reading books, studying, or helping around the house. When she brought home good grades from school, her parents barely noticed. Sometimes her mother would simply say, "That's good," and then immediately turn to Naledi and ask about her day. If Naledi won a small school competition, the family celebrated like it was a huge achievement. But when Amara ranked at the top of her class, it was treated like something normal that didn't deserve much attention. Slowly, the difference in how they were treated began to change Naledi. Because she was always praised and admired, Naledi started believing she was more important than everyone else, especially her quiet younger sister. At home, Naledi would order Amara around like a servant. "Amara, bring me water. Amara, clean my room. Amara, finish my chores too." If Amara refused or tried to complain, Naledi would mock her in front of their parents. And instead of stopping her, their parents often laughed or ignored the situation. "Just do what your sister says," their father would say casually. "She's older." So Amara stayed quiet. She learned very early that arguing would only make things worse. Instead, she poured all her energy into one thing, her education. While Naledi spent time going to parties and enjoying attention, Amara spent long nights studying under a small lamp in her room. She read books about business, finance, and law. Her dream was simple. One day she would leave Kasanga Valley and build a life where no one could treat her like she didn't matter. Years later, that dream finally came true. After finishing university with excellent grades, Amara moved to Macondo City, a busy place full of opportunities. There, she started working for a financial investigations firm. Her job was serious and difficult. She helped investigate companies that were suspected of fraud, corruption, and illegal money transfers. Amara was very good at her work. Her quiet personality helped her notice details others missed. She could spend hours studying financial records, connecting small clues, and uncovering hidden secrets. But back in Kasanga Valley, her family didn't really understand what she did. To them, Amara was still the quiet girl who stayed in the background. Naledi especially never cared to ask about her sister's career. In her mind, Amara was still the same shy girl who used to follow her around the house. What Naledi didn't know was that Amara's work often involved exposing powerful people who believed their secrets would never be discovered. And recently, one particular investigation had revealed a name that shocked Amara completely. A name connected to a man everyone in Mavuno Ridge was celebrating that very night, Cabello Dlamini. A few weeks before the engagement party, Amara was sitting in her small office in Macondo City, staring at a computer screen full of numbers and bank records. It was late at night, and most of the office lights were already off. But Amara was still working, carefully studying a case that had been assigned to her team. The case involved a company based in Rakama province. At first, it looked like a normal investment company that promised people high returns. Many investors had trusted the company with their savings, hoping their money would grow. But something about the financial records didn't look right. Large amounts of money were being moved from one account to another. Some accounts didn't even seem to belong to real businesses. The transactions were hidden through complicated transfers, almost as if someone was trying very hard to make the money disappear. Amara began investigating deeper. For days she checked every record, every contract, and every transfer. The more she searched, the more suspicious the case became. Millions of dollars had been quietly moved through fake companies and secret accounts. Many of the investors had already started complaining. Some of them had lost their entire life savings. Families were struggling because the money they had trusted to this company had suddenly vanished. Amara felt a heavy weight in her chest as she continued reading the files. Finally, she opened a document that listed the company's main director. The moment she saw the name, her heart almost stopped. Cabello Dlamini. She blinked, thinking maybe she had read it wrong. Slowly, she leaned closer to the screen and read the name again. Cabello Dlamini, Nalady's fiancé. For a few seconds, Amara just sat there in silence, trying to process what she was seeing. The same man who was about to marry her sister was the director of a company involved in a huge financial fraud. Amara didn't want to believe it. She immediately began checking everything again. She opened more documents, searched more records, and reviewed every transaction connected to Cabello's company. Maybe there had been a mistake. Maybe it was another person with the same name. But the deeper she investigated, the worse the truth became. The documents clearly showed Cabello's signature. His name appeared in contracts. His private accounts were connected to several suspicious transfers. Millions of dollars had been moved through fake companies that existed only on paper. Investors had been promised success, but their money had quietly disappeared into hidden accounts. This was not a small mistake. It was a massive financial scandal. For several nights, Amara barely slept. She stayed in the office late, checking every detail again and again. Part of her desperately hoped she would find something that proved Cabello was innocent, because if the evidence was true, her sister was about to marry a criminal. But every document confirmed the same terrifying truth. Cabello Dlamini was involved in a dangerous fraud that had already destroyed many lives. Amara felt torn inside. Nalady had never treated her kindly, but she was still her sister. No matter how painful their relationship had been, Amara couldn't stay silent and watch Nalady marry a man like that. So she made a difficult decision. She would go to the engagement party in Mavuno Ridge and warn her sister before it was too late. She collected the most important documents, placed them carefully inside a small box, and brought them with her that night. She didn't come to embarrass anyone. She came to protect her sister from making the biggest mistake of her life. But the moment she tried to speak, Nalady slapped her in front of everyone. After the slap and the uncomfortable silence that followed, Nalady quickly forced a smile onto her face. She looked around at the shocked guests and clapped her hands as if nothing serious had happened. "Everyone relax," she said with a small laugh. "It's just family drama. Let's continue the celebration." The musicians slowly started playing again. Waiters moved around with trays of drinks, and guests began talking once more. Although the atmosphere was no longer as cheerful as before, many people were still whispering about what they had just seen. Nalady walked back to the center of the garden and held Cabello's arm proudly, as if trying to prove that everything was still perfect. Cabello seemed completely relaxed. In fact, he looked amused. With a confident smile, he raised his glass and joked with a group of guests nearby. "Looks like someone couldn't handle seeing her sister so happy," he said lightly. "Jealousy can make people do strange things." A few people laughed awkwardly at his comment. Some nodded as if they believed him. Nalady also laughed, shaking her head as though Amara's appearance had been nothing more than an embarrassing interruption. "Don't worry about her," Nalady told the guests. "She has always been a little dramatic." But while the party continued inside the bright garden, Amara had not actually left the mansion. After placing the small gift box on the table, she quietly walked through the side path of the garden and stepped outside the main celebration area. She stopped near the tall iron gate at the edge of the property, where the lights were dimmer and the music sounded distant. From there, she could still see the party through the trees. Guests were dancing again. Laughter slowly returned. Nalady and Cabello stood together greeting people and accepting congratulations. To everyone inside the garden, the night looked normal again. But Amara knew something they didn't. She stood quietly with her arms folded, her expression calm but serious. The cool night breeze moved through the trees as she watched the celebration from a distance. A security guard near the gate glanced at her curiously, but Amara didn't move. She was waiting. Earlier that evening, before she even arrived at the party, Amara had already made an important phone call. When she realized how serious Cabello's crimes were, she understood that simply warning Nalady might not be enough. A man capable of stealing millions from innocent people would not easily admit the truth. So Amara contacted someone she trusted. Detective Omari Kato from the Macondo Financial Crimes Unit. She had worked with him before on other investigations. He was known for being calm, careful, and impossible to fool. Amara had sent him copies of the documents she had collected, the bank records, the contracts, the evidence of hidden transfers. Enough proof to show that Cabello Dlamini was involved in a massive fraud. When Detective Omari reviewed the files, he immediately understood how serious the case was. That was why he told Amara something important before ending the call. "We're coming tonight." Now, standing quietly near the gate, Amara looked down the dark road outside the mansion. The music from the party continued behind her. Guests were laughing again, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Inside the garden, Cabello was raising another glass, smiling confidently as if the future belonged to him. But the truth was already on its way. And very soon, the perfect engagement party in Mavuno Ridge was about to turn into a night no one there would ever forget. The music was playing again, and the party slowly returned to life. Guests were dancing, waiters were serving drinks, and the bright lights made the garden look magical once more. Naledi stood proudly beside Cabello, smiling as more people came to congratulate them. To everyone there, it looked like the embarrassing moment with Amara was already forgotten. After a while, Cabello raised his glass and gently tapped it with a spoon to get everyone's attention. The music stopped again, and guests turned toward him with smiles. Cabello wrapped one arm around Naledi's shoulders and lifted his glass higher. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he said confidently. "This is one of the happiest nights of my life. I'm lucky to be marrying such a beautiful and wonderful woman." Guests clapped and cheered. Naledi smiled proudly, leaning closer to him. But just as Cabello was about to continue his speech, something strange happened. From outside the mansion, bright blue lights suddenly flashed against the trees and the tall walls of the garden. First, people thought it might be another car arriving. But the lights kept flashing. Guests began looking around in confusion. A few people moved closer to the gate to see what was happening. Then the large iron gate slowly opened. Several police officers walked inside the property. The cheerful music was replaced by silence as the officers entered the garden. Guests stepped back, whispering nervously to each other. "What's going on? Why are the police here?" At the front of the group was a tall man wearing a dark jacket. His face looked calm and serious as his eyes scanned the crowd. It was Detective Omari Kato. He walked forward slowly until he stood in the center of the garden, surrounded by confused guests. Then, in a clear and steady voice, he asked, "Is Mr. Cabello Dlamini present?" The entire crowd turned to look at Cabello. Cabello's confident smile faded slightly, but he quickly forced a laugh. Naledi also laughed nervously, clearly thinking there had been some mistake. "Oh, there must be some misunderstanding," she said quickly. "This is an engagement party." But Detective Omari did not smile. Instead, his eyes moved calmly across the gift table nearby. Then he stepped toward it. On the table, surrounded by expensive presents wrapped in gold paper, sat the small plain box that Amara had left earlier. The same box that everyone had ignored. Detective Omari picked it up slowly. Naledi looked confused. Cabello's face became tense. The detective opened the box and carefully pulled out a stack of documents. The garden became completely silent as he looked through the papers. Bank records, signed contracts, financial transfers, evidence of millions of dollars moving through fake accounts. After a few seconds, Detective Omari looked directly at Cabello. His voice remained calm, but his words were heavy. "Mr. Cabello Dlamini," he said, "you are under investigation for financial fraud involving multiple companies across Rakama province." A loud wave of shocked whispers spread through the crowd. Naledi stared at the detective in disbelief. "That's impossible," she said quickly. "There must be some mistake." But the detective held up the document so everyone could see. "These records clearly show illegal financial activity connected to Mr. Dlamini's company," he continued. Guests who had been praising Cabello only minutes earlier were now staring at him with shock. Some people stepped away from him as if he were suddenly dangerous. The perfect engagement celebration was falling apart, right in front of everyone. And somewhere near the gate, standing quietly in the shadows, Amara watched everything unfold exactly as she knew it would. For a few seconds after the detective spoke, the garden was completely silent. The same guests who had been laughing and celebrating only moments earlier now stood frozen, staring at Cabello. Cabello's confident smile slowly disappeared. His hand, which had been holding a glass of champagne, trembled slightly before he placed it down on the table. The relaxed, charming man everyone had admired just minutes ago suddenly looked tense and uncomfortable. Detective Omari calmly continued reading from the documents in his hand. Mr. Cabello Dlamini is connected to several illegal financial operations, he said clearly. Millions of dollars were taken from investors through fake companies and false investment promises. These crimes have affected victims in Rakama Province, Macondo City, and Kasanga Valley. Gasps spread through the crowd. Some guests began whispering loudly to each other. Millions? That can't be true. But the detective has the documents. People who had been shaking Cabello's hand earlier now slowly stepped away from him. The admiration in their eyes had turned into suspicion and shock. One elderly man who had proudly invested money in Cabello's company suddenly looked pale. My savings, he whispered quietly to his wife. Meanwhile, Cabello tried to regain control of the situation. He forced a laugh, though his voice sounded strained. This is ridiculous, he said quickly. These accusations are nonsense. Someone must have made a mistake. But Detective Omari didn't react. Instead, he calmly showed another document with Cabello's signature clearly printed on it. Your personal accounts are directly connected to these transactions, the detective said. We also have records of the fake companies used to hide the money. Cabello's face grew darker. For the first time that night, he had no clever joke, no confident speech, no charming smile to save him. The mask he had worn in front of everyone was slowly falling apart. Guests looked at him as if they were seeing a completely different person. But no one looked more shocked than Naledi. She stood beside him completely frozen. Her heart was beating so fast she could barely breathe. Just minutes ago, she had been proudly standing next to the man she believed she would marry. She had imagined a perfect future with him. Now everything felt like it was collapsing. Her eyes slowly moved from the detective to the documents and finally to Cabello. The man she trusted suddenly looked like a stranger. And then another painful realization hit her. Her mind replayed the moment from earlier that night. Amara walking toward her with the small box. Amara trying to speak, and her own hand striking her sister's face in front of everyone. Naledi's stomach twisted painfully. The sister she had humiliated, insulted, and thrown out of the party had actually come there to warn her. Amara hadn't come to ruin the engagement. She had come to protect her. Naledi felt her eyes filling with tears as the truth finally became clear. While everyone else had been celebrating and praising Cabello, the only person who knew the truth had been the sister she had always treated like she didn't matter. And now the entire town was watching as Cabello's perfect image collapsed right in front of them. Naledi barely noticed the crowd around her as the officers gently guided Cabello toward the waiting police car. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists, and his face was pale and defeated. Guests whispered and gasped, some pointing, some shaking their heads in disbelief. But Naledi didn't care about any of them. All she could think about was her sister. Without a word, she ran out of the garden, through the side path, and into the cooler night air. Her heels clicked loudly against the stone walkway as she searched frantically for Amara. The air smelled faintly of flowers from the garden, but Naledi barely noticed. She couldn't stop thinking about the small gift box and the warning she had ignored. Finally, near the tall iron gate at the edge of the property, she saw her. Amara was standing quietly in the shadows, her small bag slung over her shoulder, preparing to leave. Her face was calm, almost serene, as if she had expected everything to happen exactly this way. Naledi ran toward her, her chest heaving, tears welling in her eyes. Amara, wait. Please, she said, her voice breaking. She stopped just a few feet away, struggling to find the words. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have slapped you. I was wrong. I didn't understand. Amara turned to look at her, and for the first time all night, Naledi noticed the gentle strength in her sister's eyes. Amara's face wasn't angry. She didn't look hurt. She simply shook her head slightly and said softly, Naledi, I didn't come to embarrass you. I came to save you. Those words hit Naledi like a wave. She felt the weight of every cruel word, every dismissive glance, every time she had ignored Amara over the years pressing down on her chest. She remembered the nights she had demanded Amara do chores, The time she had boasted about herself while Amara quietly succeeded, and the countless moments she had taken her sister for granted. And now here she was, the sister she had humiliated, the sister she had treated like nothing, had saved her entire future. Tears spilled down Naledi's cheeks as she whispered, I don't deserve you. Amara smiled faintly, a small kind smile that carried no bitterness. Maybe not today, she said gently, but that's why I stayed quiet before. I wanted you to see the truth yourself, to understand what mattered. Naledi felt a deep wave of shame wash over her. She realized that for years, she had been blind to the love, loyalty, and strength of the sister standing in front of her. The sister she had mocked, shoved aside and underestimated, was the one who had truly protected her. For a long moment, the two sisters just stood there under the faint glow of the garden lights. Naledi's shoulders shook with silent sobs while Amara remained steady, a quiet force in the night. I promise, Naledi whispered finally. I'll never take you for granted again. Amara nodded once simply and turned toward the gate. Her quiet presence that night had changed everything. She had saved not just Naledi, but also the future that Naledi had been blind to until now. And for the first time, Naledi understood the true meaning of loyalty, courage, and sisterly love. By the next morning, Mavuno Ridge was buzzing with news. From small coffee shops to the busy streets, everyone was talking about what had happened at the Nkosi mansion the night before. People gathered in groups, whispering, pointing, and shaking their heads in disbelief. The story of Cabello Dlamini's arrest had spread like wildfire. Newspapers ran bold headlines. Engagement party turns into arrest. Millionaire exposed. The photos showed Cabello being led away in handcuffs, his confident smile gone, replaced by a pale, shocked expression. But as the papers went on, another detail caught everyone's attention. The real hero wasn't a detective, a journalist, or a government official. It was Amara Nkosi, the quiet younger sister who had been slapped and humiliated just hours earlier. People were stunned. Many who had seen her at the party only remembered her as the shy girl standing nervously in the corner. No one expected that same girl to have uncovered evidence that exposed a fraudster who had stolen millions from innocent investors. Conversations across the town shifted quickly. Can you believe it? One neighbor asked. The girl everyone ignored. She's the one who saved Naledi. Relatives who had laughed at Amara just the night before felt a mix of shame and admiration. Aunties and cousins who had whispered about her being dramatic or jealous now praised her bravery openly. She did the right thing, they said. She saved the family from disaster. Even people who had invested in Cabello's schemes were grateful to Amara. Some of them had lost their savings, but thanks to her, the investigation had started before the losses could grow worse. Slowly, respect for Amara began replacing the laughter and whispers that had followed her in the past. Yet, despite the sudden attention, Amara did not seek praise. She didn't post on social media or tell anyone her side of the story. She quietly collected her things and returned to Macondo City. She had work to do, cases that involved fraud, corruption, and people who needed her help. The Nkosi party was over, and the town's gossip would fade, but her responsibility remained. At her small office in Macondo, she sat at her desk, sipping a cup of coffee, and began reviewing new reports. She felt no need for recognition. What mattered to her was justice. She had done what she had to do for her sister and for the people who had been cheated. Meanwhile, in Mavuno Ridge, Naledi's life had changed forever. People would talk about that night for years, about the perfect engagement party that turned into a scandal, about Cabello's downfall, and about the quiet, brave sister who had seen the truth when no one else had. Amara had stayed true to herself. She had acted not for fame or glory, but for what was right, and that made her victory all the more powerful. The town learned a hard lesson that day. Sometimes the people who seem invisible are the ones who hold the most strength, and the sister who had always been ignored had finally shown everyone what true courage looked like. A few weeks after that unforgettable night, Naledi found herself walking through the busy streets of Macondo City. She carried a small bouquet of flowers and her heart was heavy with emotions she could no longer ignore. She was heading to her sister's apartment, the quiet, strong sister she had ignored for so long. When Amara opened the door, Naledi felt a lump in her throat. Gone was the proud, confident sister who had slapped her at the party. Standing there was a calm, gentle woman, carrying the same quiet strength Naledi had always taken for granted. Amara, Naledi began, her voice soft, almost trembling. I came to say thank you. And I'm sorry. Amara's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Naledi saw no anger there, only understanding. Amara gave a small warm smile. I know, she said simply. I didn't do it to embarrass you or to make you feel small. I did it because I care. I did it because I couldn't let you make a mistake that would ruin your life. Naledi's throat tightened. She looked down for a moment, ashamed. For years, I was blind. I thought I was the only one who mattered. I ignored you, I underestimated you. And yet, you saved me. You saved me from everything I couldn't see. Amara stepped forward and placed a gentle hand on her sister's shoulder. Sometimes the person who humiliates you is the one who doesn't understand your love yet, she said softly. Naledi's eyes filled with tears. She could finally see clearly. The sister she had mocked, the sister she had ignored, had been loyal, brave, and strong from the very beginning. Everything she had done that night, every quiet action, had been to protect Naledi. For a long moment the two sisters stood there in silence, letting the truth sink in. The slap that had shocked an entire party, that had embarrassed and humiliated Amara, had actually revealed something far greater. The depth of loyalty, the meaning of courage, and the love that sometimes goes unseen. Naledi whispered almost to herself, I'll never be blind again. I see you now clearly. And Amara, smiling gently, simply nodded. She had always seen everything clearly, and now finally so had Naledi.